Hello everyone! My name is Daniel Silasko, and with this talk I want to give a detailed report on the experiences of an individual with cyber sickness. So what is the rationale or the motivation of this talk? It is 2021 and fortunately there's a common knowledge that cyber sickness as a form of motion sickness exists and is bad. Further, we tend to say that there is also consensus in cyber sickness being an actual problem that should or has to be addressed. And while I'm sure this consensus is reached in the workshop, because otherwise you maybe would have not attended, things start to get crumbly already at this point. Yes, the minority of today's VR games includes continuous virtual travel, and there are comfort options in nearly everyone. But then there are these moments where the CEO of a big company states in public that cyber sickness is a solved problem and people will get used to it. Or a colleague states that we know how to avoid cyber sickness, just stop continuously moving and that's it. I am not sure how you feel about this, but I want to move continuously in VR. So at the end, we are not sure about the consensus for this point. When it comes to cyber sickness being a complex, not easy explainable phenomenon, things get worse. I don't want to state that many researchers, collaborators and developers are not aware of this. No, we think they are. But results are often misread or effects overestimated, and we named already a prominent example. Yes, there is evidence that some people habituate to VR experiences. But by far not everybody does, and the problem persists. With this talk, we want to create awareness how cyber sickness can feel for the individual. We have found someone that is very sensitive to cyber sickness, but still is confronted with it on an almost daily basis. He wants to share his experiences. We will keep him anonymous through the course of this talk and refer to him as Mark. At this point, we have to interrupt for a disclaimer. We are reporting about one individual. This work does neither contain new findings regarding cyber sickness nor wants to postulate them. Instead, we want to create awareness and want to give insights into the daily life with cyber sickness. That being said, let's have a closer look on Mark. Mark is 35 years old and male. He's 1.85 meter tall, left-handed and overweight. His IPDs was measured 67 millimeters. He was always doing a lot of sports. Today there's only left swimming and hiking, and his fitness level thus has decreased in recent years. Let's not talk about COVID times. So let's do some cross-checks with literature. Mark is middle-aged and a grandpa when it comes to the regular study population. Age is often related with a negative impact on sickness vulnerability, but then there are sources stating that people get even immune with age, so results are mixed. Mark maybe got lucky regarding his gender. Would he be even more vulnerable as a female? There is some evidence for this, but the reasons are part of speculation. His overweight and decreasing fitness level might be a negative factor when it comes to sickness vulnerability. Let's have a look on Mark's medical history if there's anything of interest. And there's not too much. In primary school he suffered from heterophoria, which was cured by therapy. Also in primary school he suffered from stress-related migraine. Today there are no obvious artifacts left. He is healthy, takes no form of medication or therapy. There are no visual impairments. Anyways, Mark shows strong body reactions under stress, which are related to the ones he's showing when he's cyber sick. We will talk about that later. His motion sickness susceptibility score, though, is 0. In his family, also his sister is hypersensitive to cyber sickness, while his mother is not. Cross-checking tells us that there are indeed connections found between migraine and motion sickness, but Mark does not suffer from any form of it today. Very interesting is that he's not suffering from any other form of motion sickness. Thus, his MSSQ score is being 0, where this is one of the strongest predictors for sickness vulnerability. Let's have a look on user experience next. Mark faces computer screens up to 15 hours a day, working and gaming. He uses VR devices for more than 7 years now, including caves, stereo displays and HMDs. Before this time there were sporadical uses and he does not remember to got sick back then. However, maybe he just was not aware of the existence of cyber sickness or applications were sickness friendly. Again, cross-checking with literature, gaming experience seems to be a good thing regarding sickness vulnerability. Not so for Mark. In the introduction we already grabbed habituation. There is habituation to sickness found in literature, most of the time from novice to non-novice users. What is often not discussed in literature, however, are possible reasons. We think this is in particular important as our own observations showed that people get also used to experience by not taking part any longer, avoiding sickening situations, or changing behavior such as closing their eyes while turning. This all is not meant by habituation but potentially measured as such. For Mark, it only got worse with time, which negatively correlates with experience but more likely comes down to age or fitness level. Let's go to the maybe most interesting part. When does Mark get sick? This almost exclusively happens in presence of virtual rotation, but not always. There are rare instances where applications make heavy use of virtual rotation and Mark is not affected by any sickness symptoms. These instances are unfortunately not reproducible. Mark also performs VR gaming, usually standing, without any issues, but as already referred to in the introduction, the majority of games avoid continuous virtual movements by design. Mark is developing continuous and semi-continuous locomotion interfaces. When developing and testing, and this happens often multiple times a week, there are always moderate to severe instances of cyber sickness symptoms at some point. Where moderate means he stops using VR for that day but can continue working, and severe means he has to lay down and rest for at least 30 minutes. Some symptoms then last at least for the rest of the day. One reason for the often strong instances of sickness, of course, is based on the nature of his experiences. He is developing these interfaces, which means that they are often not addled or broken. Further, Mark describes the instances of sickness more raising event-based than continuously increasing. Often it is even one single knockout event caused, for instance, by an unexpected and heavy rotation. While he would say that the instances of sickness are more regular and severe when using HMDs, there were also instances of severe sickness in caves. The differences could already be based on the fact that there are less virtual rotations required in a cave. Finally, Mark rarely experienced similar symptoms when watching other people playing fast games or more recently when monitoring participants taking part in a VR experiment. Something interesting here is that sitting has shown to have a positive impact on sickness vulnerability, and our own observations confirm this. Mark's case, however, nicely illustrates that sitting people still get sick, and depending on other factors, they can even get more sick than in a standing condition. This is one of the misunderstandings that we often hear. Effects are overestimated. Regarding Mark's sickness experiences outside of VR, it is just hard to say if they are related or based on conditioning, for example. How do Mark's symptoms look like? So this is actually the most difficult part. Grabbing and describing the symptoms can be difficult when neither being an expert to medicine nor being trained for it, and when being always sick. He first tried to describe it with other situations. He was never poisoned, but this is how he would imagine it feels like. It is as would your whole circulatory system shut down, or you're feeling weak, powerless, comparable to a flu. The symptoms always already start after seconds or minutes after exposure and can last for days. Mark tried to record his feelings more systematically, thus answered simulator sickness questionnaires and did audio recordings. The results of this endeavor you can find summed up here. What you see are the 16 symptoms listed in the SSQ plus 2 additional ones. Their occurrence is given for the moderate and the severe instances of sickness we were talking about before. Dark blue circles indicate symptoms that do occur always, and light blue circles symptoms that do occur sometimes. Their radius indicates the strength of the symptom. We do not have the time to discuss every aspect here. Please refer to the paper or me afterwards for this. Anyways, there are some interesting things we want to discuss here. First, at the end it was possible for Mark to find almost every of his symptoms in this questionnaire, which he is using for years now, but it took him enormous effort, self-reflection and thinking to do so. What does this mean for participants? Some of the symptoms never occur for Mark, such as nausea and increased salivation. As you might have already discovered, Mark wanted us to add 2 more symptoms. The first is coughing. This always occurs together with the single heavy knockout events we talked about before. Other symptoms might be delayed, but when he has to cough, he already knows that this will end up in bed very soon. The second is yawning. This sometimes occurs with less severe instances of sickness, but also is a good sign to quit. The last thing we want to mark here is the delay of symptoms. Not only that symptoms are usually delayed and increase after exposure for Mark, but that the symptoms can be categorized by their immediacy. So coughing is something that always is closely related in time to the knockout event, while headache and eye strain are starting minutes later. When it comes to treatment and recovery, we are done quickly. To recover, Mark does lay down for at least 30 minutes. He tries to have some fresh air and some slightly sugared drink. When appetite comes back, eating seems to help a lot. He never did big experiments, did not try ginger or drugs, as they usually only fight symptoms. Mark tried a lot when it comes to system factors and methods that have the aim to prevent or counter cybersickness. We already talked multiple times about sitting, and we are currently investigating this in a user study that is on ice because of COVID-19. There is field of view modification, the inclusion of a reference frame, embodied locomotion, and semi-continuous locomotion, where we actually have a paper on in the locomotion workshop at VR next Friday. He tried all these, some of them in combination, and the bad news is he is still getting sick. The good news, however, is he thinks they all have a positive effect, and he might be a hopeless case where others might be not. Which already brings us to the conclusion of this talk. We have monitored a few hundred participants during VR studies, and none has ever shown symptoms that were comparable in strength with Mark's, with one exception, his sister. Mark is special, and it is unclear whether his experiences can be of special interest because of this, or completely uninteresting because he is just a special case. But we do not have to answer this question, because this report mainly had another purpose, and for this it serves as good as any other. Mark's experiences and history in many parts are in line with current findings and expectations, while they contradict to others. We claim that this is the case for most people that are vulnerable to cybersickness, and that there is not a simple pattern. Mark's vulnerability to stress might be another starting point for further investigations, but we can already say that this again will not deliver this one simple answer. There are too many people suffering from cybersickness being completely different. Counters and preventions show effects, but people, not only Mark, still get sick. Finally, a life and work with cybersickness is possible, but not worth striving for. With these words, I want to thank you for your attention. If you have answers, want to discuss, want to subject mark, or have an opinion, contact me.